What's going on, everybody? This is SJG, and you are watching D2 HBCU Football Matters. We told you last week. And it showed up on Saturday. Call it prophetic, but here we are. It's SJG, and I'm here with the two Ks of D2 HBCU football representing the SIAC and the CIAA, as well as Tuskegee University and, Winston-Salem State University. We'll give a little love in the background there. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to D2 HBCU Football Matters, and I'm really excited to have both of these guys here. It's an honor. And let's just get right into it, man. Both you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves to those who don't know you, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, I'll go first. I'm D2 HBCU Football on Twitter. I supported the SIAC. I'm a Tuskegee gentleman. Tuskegee all the way to you. Just glad to be on. Glad to be on with you two guys.
Yeah. I'm Chris Ferguson. I'm the D2Football.com CIAA writer. I've been doing this for several years now. Sort of branched out into different things and also contribute from time to time on HBCU game day.
All right, guys. Can you guys hear me? My headphones. All right. So both guys, I appreciate you for hopping on and starting this conversation. So let's just get to it. We had a big week of HBCU football in the D2 level. We had a lot of people playing a lot of different games. Some people were playing, a couple people played some NIA teams, and some of them got beat. Some of them played some D2 competition, and out of conference non-HBCUs. They kind of sort of went away. And then also we had people playing the D2 versus D1 games that our guy Chris really loves. His favorite type of games. Chris, man, give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts, man. CIAA, two big wins. I know they don't count for the playoffs. Go ahead and tell us, man. But just tell us about those two wins and what you saw out there.
Yeah. So the CIAA had three games. They went 2 out of 3 here. The two big wins was Bowie State going up to Dover, Delaware to play Delaware State. And that was a bit of a defensive game, but it's kind of unusual that a D2 school would get up on an FCS school like that, and they never let up. They never trailed in this game. Bowie debuted a new quarterback, another Amir Jenkins, who was a transfer from some Sacred Heart. And I thought he played reasonably well, but Bowie's always been a team when they're really scary is when they can score on defense, and that's exactly what happened on Saturday as well. So a 22-11 score, but it wasn't really that close. That last touchdown for Del State was like late in the fourth quarter. It didn't matter at that point. The more interesting game was Virginia State playing Norfolk State in the Battle of the States. The more interesting and what was really cool about that was they also went back and forth quite a bit. Those schools traded like several leads in that game before Virginia State took over for good early in the fourth quarter. It was another school that debuted a new quarterback, Rombella Williams, who was a transfer from Central Connecticut. And him and Jordan Davis, last year's starter, kind of traded blows, but really, they got it done on the ground. Upton Bailey had, almost 200 yards rushing, which is kind of the recipe for Virginia State. If they take down Norfolk State, it's because they have a very punishing ground game. And we saw that back in 2017 when Trent Cannon did something similar. The end of the game was really crazy. When Norfolk State drove down, they got stopped on fourth down. And not only that, but then Virginia State gets the ball. They are fourth down on like they're inside their own 10, and they Jordan Davis tries to run out and get a first down rather than just stay in the end zone and run the game out. Like, take the safety at that point. Yeah, but that didn't happen. Norfolk State gets the ball back 1 second left to kick the field goal, go to overtime, and they just bumble the snap. And so, 33-24, but that game was a lot closer than what it should have been. But nonetheless, those are two huge wins, especially because those guys go against, the Norfolk States and the Dale States and a number of those schools for recruiting. It was huge. It was really huge.
Yeah, no doubt. It was definitely a big win. I know earlier in the year we had early in the summer we had Coach Frazier talking about how he really wasn't looking forward to this game, scholarship differential, and man, a lot of folks were saying he had given up on that game, but clearly a little bit of playing coy. So for sure, we'll probably talk about those again before we get out of here. But Kendrick, man, the SIAC, they picked up a D1 win as well. Yeah, Chris, we're gonna come back too because we're gonna talk about what we talked about in the previous show too. Because I asked you which one had the better chance, and that was a pretty interesting response. I'm sure the Bowie faithful will not forget that. But Kendrick, Central State, is a team that has struggled in the SIAC. But last year they started the season off with a big win over a certain team that wears right on national TV, and this year they started off one with another classic win over a team that's an FCS school. Man, talk about Central State picking off Mississippi Valley.
Huge win. Shout out to Coach Porter and what they're doing at Central State. One of the things I think early on that kind of concerned me or gave me I won't say concern. I had a little hope in that matchup with just a simple fact that I knew that Central State could throw the ball around. You watch them. The conference collectively had a problem with keeping their quarterbacks healthy last season. So I was like, Brandon Cowles coming back, and then lo and behold, they trot out there, and game time, they pop a new quarterback on us. They pop Alex Lewis out, and I'm like, wait, where did he come from? And they did the interview with Coach Porter, and he was like, man, I got 3 guys that can really sling it, but he won out in fall camp, so. Right off the bat, I realized like he has an arm, and my whole thing was if Central State could string together a couple of drives and get him settled in, they could take Mississippi Valley down to the wire. I think one of the things that initially was kind of helping Mississippi Valley was the fact that the offense just needed time to gel. And they did. As the game progressed, you saw them get more and more comfortable, more and more gain more and more confidence. And he started making passes. Those wide receivers dropped some passes early on that were right on the money. I mean, he dropped some dimes that really could open that game up for Central State. And I got to mention what Coach Wade from Mississippi Valley said at halftime. They interviewed him. He said, well, you know what? They just need to self-correct because it wasn't anything that Central State was doing that was giving them trouble. It was just themselves. So I guess they never self-corrected. And they took the L.
Yeah, man. It's the way that these things go, man, it's definitely a big win for Central State. I mean, if we're all being honest, there's always a discussion that goes on in HBCU sports sometimes about whether or not certain HBCUs or if HBCUs at all should be at the Division I level. And I think case number one for the Division I, the team that's in Division I that probably should be in Division II, just from a financial standpoint, if nothing else, is Mississippi Valley State. So I think that, obviously, if you look at their budget, man, I think their budget, total is it's very minuscule. Even there's, teams in the CIAA, teams in the SIAC who spend, just as much on athletics. And obviously Mississippi is a state that's, it's not, economics they're tough at economics there. They're in a small place, they're not in Jackson, even Alcorn, is able to outspend them as well. So tough for Mississippi Valley. But I mean, if you look at Central State, man, I mean, this is not a team, Kendrick, I think you were saying last night that anybody's really expecting a lot out of, even in the SIAC, and they were able to get this win. Talk about that.
You know, it was like a lot of unknowns going into the team. Like last season, they've always been able to move the ball. They can score points because that's one thing that they believe in, throwing the ball. They were throwing the ball when everybody else was running the ball. I remember last season there was a game that Brandon Cowles threw like 53 times in the game. And you know that's kind of that's wild for the SIAC to have a quarterback throw 50 plus times in the game. So I know that that's what they like to do. They came out. I was, you know, a little hesitant about their defensive line. They're still young. They play a lot of freshmen up front, but they grew up as the game went along. You know, they just gained that confidence. I feel like after they got past the stage of just filling them out, they buckled down and they played, you know, solid football. How they'll fare in the conference, you know, I mean, we've seen teams knock off FCS teams before and then just get in conference play and just fall apart. You know, I mean, even with Tuskegee itself, you know, knocking off 2 FCS teams, they don't even win the conference. So, you know, they still have a lot of work to do. I'm not really sure about the speed up front because you look at some offensive lines in the conference, they have, you know, improved than what they were last year. So we'll see, but definitely they can definitely score points. So I still have them as that 4-16.
Can we talk about something real quick? I mean, this is
Go
a D2
ahead.
show. It's a D2 show, right? So when you look at the schedule for Mississippi Valley, they have to play Delta State in like 2 weeks. I mean, I think that just only proves the point of like how much they just need to come on back on home because I mean, if Central State's been able to get past them, imagine what Delta's going to do in a couple of weeks. I mean, come on.
Listen, you know, but you know something. I think a lot of the D2 players have kind of like taken on this personally. There was a lot of talk in the offseason. I know, like Cornell Manor made the statement about playing cupcakes, even to the point he Edward Waters got the straight, and it even caused Edward Waters president to make a statement about what was said. You see, the recruiting battles. I don't know, like how close people watch recruiting battles, but a lot of the D2 teams were scrambling at the very end because a lot of guys that were leaving the transfer portal from the FCS HBCUs, they came and they kind of raided, you know, those D2 signing classes. And so, you know, a lot of that was taken personal. And I feel like a lot of these coaches and players have said, you know what, you want to come in and raid? Only way we can prove them, stop you from raiding, you know, in our ranks is to come out and show we can compete. And not only did they show they competed, like they came out and they beat. And it didn't just happen, you know, within the HBCU confines. You see North Greenville almost beat Charleston Southern. You know, really just a mistake on their part. The reason why they didn't beat, I mean, you know, no shade to Coach Gade, you know, come from Albany State, but I mean, they almost got their tails whooped.
Yeah, and you know, it's also West Virginia State deserves some love here as an HBCU because they lost by 2 to Moorhead, which is another FCS program. So, you know, you have some teams that are sort of right there, not just from the PWIs, but also from the HBCU ranks. And I think what's special about Bowie and Virginia State is that those schools are directly recruiting against a Norfolk State or a Delaware State for talent. Even Lincoln is kind of in that same space as well. So, you know, I think Lincoln's kind of a little bit on the move up than they have been in prior years. So, you know, it's like if you want to go win, you know, do you go Division I just to say I'm a Division I player? Or do you go somewhere where you can actually win, knowing that, you know, if you're talented enough, you can make it to the NFL, you can make it to the CFL, you can make it to the XFL. I mean, there are various pathways that these schools have made some grounds, not just you know, winning, but also in the pro ranks as well. So, you know, it's a really interesting dynamic for sure, but. You know, Mississippi Valley is just one of those ones that, and also, you know, since we are talking about Division II here, the other interesting battle will be in a couple weeks too, because West Florida goes to FAMU. And the hope is that FAMU doesn't lay an egg there. But that also is going to be a really interesting game to watch.
I've talked about that game. Let me insert this about Central State. I think Central State is now 7-0 against Mississippi Valley. Even when they were in NAIA, they were
Wow.
knocking off. When Coach Cumbergy was at Central State, there was that year. The last time they played, Central State played Grambling first. It was coming up on Eddie Robinson's 400th win, and Cumbergy said after he beat Grambling with an NAIA team in Central State, he said, I guess he'd have to wait another game for that win for 100. Then he turns around, they demolished Mississippi Valley. So Central State historically has been really bad and really hard for Mississippi Valley to win. So they just followed in that same, as they say, history repeats. It definitely repeated Saturday.
That's
that West Florida game though that's coming up. I've been talking about it all season. There was a lot of unknowns for West Florida, new coach. I see they went and they got for the offense coordinator they got Ron Dixon Jr. He knows his way around the SWAC. They played all three of their quarterbacks that first game. I've been peeping in because they got Giles from Virginia Union. I want to see how he did. I think he had like five receptions for like 78, 79 yards. They don't look like they're missing too much of a beat. And I'm not here to gauge how far FAMU is from last season, but what we do know is that if a third or fourth best team in the SIAC gave you trouble last season, I know they like to try to talk about it, but Albany State really dominated that game for at least 2.5 quarters. Albany State's one issue, they just couldn't pass the ball. They just passing the ball, but that's not the trouble that West Florida has. So that could go anyway.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about who was your surprise from this week, because there was so much that happened. Who was your surprise team?
I think I'm still going to go with Kentucky State. I think Kentucky State is still going to be my surprise. I just wasn't. I didn't know what to expect from Kentucky State. They still have, new quarterback. I was thinking the cat he brought in from Texas was going to start, but Perez got to start. He had a wide receiver come in with him from McNeese State, number 13. I want to say his name is Colton. Yeah. I mean, what he does when the ball is not in his hand is most important. I mean, he's blocking. Right. He's doing everything. He's athletic. So Kentucky State really surprised me. How they kept fighting. You can tell that they're young, they're coming together, and I think they're gonna get up and they're gonna get some people. I think that was a Clark team that people expected to be better than that. I guess no excuses this time of year. It's either put up or shut up, but from what I understand is they lost their first string and second string quarterback. That should be back. They have Banks from Livingston, Lincoln. He transferred from one of them. I think Lincoln.
Oh, really? Andrew Banks.
Yeah. So so he was their name starter, but from my understanding, there was issues. It's compliance issues around this time of year. But I hear that he should be back and ready to go Saturday. So that may be a different look for them Saturday. But Thursday, it was same old Clark.
Yeah, I was gonna say people were expecting things from Clark Atlanta. I mean, I know they got the legendary coach, but I don't know. I don't know. Eddie, you would know better than me.
I'm a fan of Coach Slater. I love Coach Slater. I'm a 100% supporter. You can't deny what he was able to accomplish at Tuskegee, but let the record know Tuskegee was not a rebuild when he got there. Tuskegee was definitely, he walked into the gold mine. So the question was he going to be able to go in and build a program? And that question is yet to be answered, so.
It might be a case of Kermit Blunt. It just might be time.
Hey, well, you know, in Kermit's defense, well, no. So they were good. Then he got there, and then they fell off. Then they got good. Then they tried to go D1, and Anyway,
but then he went to, like, you know, Dell State, right? And that didn't go very well. He went to John C. Smith. That didn't go very well. Although he did recruit some good pieces there, but in the end, it was just too big of a hill to climb. So, you know, I kind of wonder, is that kind of the same thing at Clark? You know, is it just too big of a hill to climb?
You know, and one of the things with me that I was really concerned, when you get a week before fall practice and you still have coaches, you know, on Twitter putting out JUCO, you know, like trying to get them, it's, you know, it's a sign. They do have depth issues up front. Like that's they have size and girth issue up front, you know, from defensive line. That's a carryover from last season. That was an issue that I thought they would really go after. And then when you see those Atlanta guys on these other rosters, and you like, wait, well, y'all needed him. How did he get here? You know, so it's like I think it's something that they're gonna have to really address. And I know that from an administrative standpoint, it came up in the space. They were saying, how long would they give Coach Slater? I wasn't really sure, but I will say, you know, they got a president that wants to win. He has given them that full allotment of scholarships, and I'm pretty sure, like, he wants to see at you know, in advance of that. And then once again, there's a new AD at Clark that wasn't there when he was hired. So we all know how those relationships can be. So who knows, man? You know. But let's see what happens when he get his guys back, the ones that he lost, you know, right before game time. Let's see if he can bounce back.
So you're saying they have a full allotment of scholarships and still was trying to recruit?
Yes, that was the big thing. I've heard from several of the Clark alumni at their meetings. One thing that Dr. French did, he went around and he showed them all his championship rings. He told them that he wants to invest in athletics and he wants this for Clark. I think a lot of people bought in to that. Bringing in Coach Slater, you know, whatever, you know, that it was a question mark for me. It was a question mark. But then when he got there, he really didn't clean house with coaches. I mean, he pretty much kept everybody that was there. You know, it was like, whoa, I wasn't sure about that, and I just don't know, man. It's like it's a bunch of unanswered questions, and I'm rooting for him. For anybody from Tuskegee that roots for Coach Slater, it's me. You know, I was very upset with my own institution about how things happen. But, yeah, man, this is just rough. It's rough sledding at Clark. That's all I can say.
You're on mute. Steven, you're on mute.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, Chris, what was your biggest surprise of week one?
My biggest surprise, I was.
Well, besides the fact that you slept on Bowie, I mean, let's just bring it up. Let's just bring it up. A shout out to Evan and DeLon. You know, you were sleeping on the Bulldogs a little bit.
I don't know. I don't know what to say except it was my twin. It wasn't really. It was AI.
Yes. We'll pause for you to hang your head in shame. You know.
Well, I mean, man, Bowie, they had a lot to figure out, and they figured it out very early. I wasn't like down, like, oh, this is a bad team or anything like that. It was just more so question marks. And they got it done. I mean, I can't do nothing but respect. I told them I'll eat crow on that. That'll be fine. You know, I am going to go in person to watch week 2, which is in Michigan. So we'll see how that goes. Now I know they're probably saying, "Oh crap, he's going to pick us this time." So well, it might be bad luck. I don't know, but you know, I certainly accept it. You know, it is what it is. I'm not going to be like that guy with Dion, the writer. No, I can accept it when I didn't believe, and so here we are.
Yeah, you know, you would have to put some Old Bay on that crow in PG County. But yeah, beyond that, give me something else that surprised you, Chris.
Big surprise, Bluefield, and how many points they put up against Livingstone. That was huge. I knew that they were capable of putting some points on the board, but not what they did. I mean, they just completely dismantled them on their own field. That was brutal. And then Fayetteville State. I think Fayetteville State was definitely a letdown from what they had last year. And I thought that, given the history that Fayetteville has with the coaches at USC Pembroke, and really half of Pembroke is Chowan, quite honestly, that they weren't able to get over that hump this early is not good. I was very surprised. I knew it was going to be close, but I just did not think that it would end that way.
Yeah, definitely a heartbreaker. Definitely a heartbreaker for Fayetteville State. Obviously after last year, they had that experience going to the playoffs. They talked about how, they wanted to build off that and really not just be happy getting to the CIAA championship, but winning. And you're facing a UNC Pembroke team that obviously is familiar with you with the new coaching staff, but, still kind of gelling, and we don't know how good UNC Pembroke is. They're damn sure not Delta State. Let's put it that way. So, they've got to regroup, because I think they've got Lenore Ryan this week. We'll talk about this week coming up later, but yeah.
So I got another beef here though, because my other issue, and this is less about Fayetteville State and more maybe about some other schools. When we're talking about depth, I made a comment about dealing with special teams. And that kind of bit quite a few teams that in the bad way when they're trying to flip the field. I think you saw that some with Morehouse, where they didn't have a lot of strength at the punter spot to start out the year. Fort Valley State, that kind of happened with as well. It bit Fayetteville State. Not that they do recruit pretty well with the kickers. But they're a kicker from the last few seasons who've made some field goals, some late game field goals. He's gone. He graduated, and I think that really just showed up in a bad way against USC Pembroke, because it was a winnable game. So when you talk about depth, I think that's one area of focus for a number of schools is at the punter and kicker spot, because that just seems to just show up in really ugly ways. So yeah. You're on mute again.
I think for sure Fayetteville State is definitely having they got, they have some come to Jesus moments. I think they had the quarterback, there was some issues there. I think from what I understand, Caden Davis didn't dress out. I think there was some they were trying to nurse him a little bit, and Daniels, the other quarterback from last year, didn't play a lot as well either. So a new quarterback, there were a lot of exchange issues early. It was it got sticky a little bit there for them. So we'll see how they regroup. I do want to acknowledge everybody that is joining us live. I appreciate everybody as we steer this thing for the first edition of it. We'll also look at John Horst says Coach Slater needs to bring an OC that runs up tempo, quick strike offense. He's too much stuck in his ways, like former bosses Chan Gailey and Bobby Wallace. I will let you address that, Kendrick.
I think the first media day that he had, SIC media day after he was let go, resigned, retired from Tuskegee, whichever title, whatever you want to say, the one you want to pull from. He acknowledged that they were people had called his play calling old, got away, and then he was turning it over to the offense coordinator was already at Clark. But you can tell his hand is still in the offense, it's resemblance, that offensive line resembles the offensive line that he would assemble when he was at Tuskegee. So I don't know how far removed he is from it. So you're right, Bobby Wallace, that was the thing. I think he admired. I know when Kentucky State, came out and first went to that triple option, he made a few comments about, hey, I won a national championship with that same offense. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not gonna win one now. Like, like that's not gonna happen. So it is what it is. Back to Chris's point about the kickers and punters. I know like Clark has one of his former coaches they coached with him from Troy is his volunteer coach to help the kickers. And you see that a lot across the conference, just have volunteer people to come help the kickers, or they, partner with one of the bigger universities and let their guys go kick with them. And then we just hope for the best, It's kind of like we pray for the best. You're absolutely right, Chris, in that Fort Valley game. 9-yard punt, 21 point. I meant Tuskegee did not prove that they could drive the ball on the field against Fort Valley. Now you look at the drive charts, we didn't prove that. We had big play capabilities, blown coverages that, and Antonio Meeks is just that guy. So we was able to get, those big hits to move the ball, but methodically driving the ball down the field. I think we had one 10-play 55 drive, and the rest of them was like 4 plays, 70 yards. It was like just those big plays that that kind of hit. And you look at a few of those times that Fort Valley could have flipped that field. That could have been big, but they just could not. Their defense played well, but they just could not flip the ball. And I think that's going to be one of their Achilles heels going forward. And that's just an area that our schools have to focus on. And I think it even goes down to like some of our predominantly Black high schools. They have horrible kicking games. You look at when they get in the playoffs, that's always the difference maker. When they go against those here in Alabama, they go against the Hoovers and the Spanish Forts and those teams. They can have good teams, good talent, go there, and then it's the special team woes that can't kick a field goal, can't kick a 20-yard field goal that ends up getting. So it's something that has to be addressed, especially those schools that we recruit from highly. Like, we're not able to go in and get solid kickers there, so it's a problem for us, and it's just something that's, I think, gonna have to be addressed on each level, not just the collegiate level. It's gonna be addressed on the high school level too.
Yeah, no, Division II, they, there are some schools that are very creative with getting kickers in the door. Some do go the JUCO routes. Some have even gotten folks from overseas. But nonetheless, that's gotta be addressed. There's too many times where you see that schools are having to revert to like a quarterback or a wide receiver to punt, and then like Morehouse, they got close in and they could not kick a field goal. They just didn't have it. So they had to go for it on 4th down where they were in field goal range. It just puts a lot more pressure on an offense to perform when you can't kick that field goal, and it puts a lot more pressure on your defense when you can't flip the field with punters. So.
Yeah, and you brought up the Morehouse game, so we'll go to that because we did have 2 SIAC CIAA matchups this weekend, 1-1. Both of them blowouts. One a little bit more impressive than the other, especially given who they were playing. But let's start with Saturday. Let's start with Benedict with a straight up beatdown of the Bears, who must have still thought it was hibernation season in Raleigh. I don't know. I did not. I think that might have been my second biggest shock of the week, to see the spread between there. I'll let Kendrick, I'll let you go first, since the SIC did the honors there, man. What was your impressions of Benedict and the smack it down that they laid on those Bears from the capital city?
So, going into that game, I really wasn't sure. I thought it was going to be a bigger test. I have openly said that, hey, they opened the season up with Elizabeth City, I think, last season. And one of my comments was that Shaw was not Elizabeth City. But yeah, Benedict came out and did the same thing. I will say I'm not sure if Shaw's QB is he's hurt or what. But when he went out of the game, it really they couldn't move the ball at all. I think that was a big moment for them. For Benedict, I was a little bit concerned about, of course, the quarterback position. There's some debate about, Coach Berry was like he wasn't that concerned about the quarterback position, but I think all of us that saw Eric Phoenix last year to say, yeah, okay, I hear you, Coach, but clearly that's why he's getting paid to be on the sidelines. And I'm just talking on the podcast because clearly he had no room to be that concerned, like he said. The offensive line is not the offensive line of last year, but they are serviceable. I did see a few times where it's like I was like, okay, yeah, this not the fist from last year, but hey, who knows? By the time Coach Beard can coach me up, I feel like at 35 I can go out there and play. What Coach Beard coaches those guys though. But over and all, I think Benedict just wanted to. You look at it. They just kind of like showed after that first quarter, because I think it was like 7-0 coming out of the first quarter. So I was like, okay, hey, if Shaw can ever get that offense to moving, we might have a game. And then they just had that big time second quarter, whether it was 20 points, 21 points, whatever it was, that they came out and just really opened that game up, and they never looked back. So Benedict is definitely there. I would argue that I believe Benedict's defense is a little bit stronger than they were last season, and that should be scary for everybody in the SIAC that they have to play. And they have a relatively, their schedule is relatively prime for them to make it back to the championship game, But I think that defense is stronger, and I think Benedict is right there, where they should be to repeat as champs.
Are you saying they got an easy path to the championship game? Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm saying, like, they have one of the easier paths. So you look at like their schedule of like teams that were over 500 that they had to play. That were over 500 last year. Wait, let me pull up their schedule, because they I don't even think they have to play Albany State this year, even though Albany State is not Albany State. Growing pains, I put it that. Let's see.
Yeah.
So they have Edward Waters, Lane, Shawan, Morehouse, Miles, Fort Valley, Kentucky State, Savannah State, Allen. Like the only team that was over 500 on their schedule is who? Shawan and Fort Valley. Like everybody else, I don't see a struggle on their schedule.
Interesting, especially with the new setup they got going there. Chris, talk to me about those guys from what is it? Oh, I'm not gonna mess up the name of the street, but over in Raleigh. Talk to me about Shaw. I don't think anybody's. And they asked, and I know somebody said the quarterback got hurt. Was he hurt like at the start of the game? Did he ever play? Because it just doesn't sound like they were ever able to do anything.
All right, so Shaw kind of
was a money game.
Well, Shaw came into the season really with three quarterbacks that were, 2 of the 3 were going to play in this game most likely anyway. And what's really interesting, so you had Christian Peters, who was the starter last year, and then you had Patrick Blake, who was a backup, and you had Silas Cruz, who was the transfer from Livingstone and actually had playing experience. He was the best quarterback at Livingstone before he transferred. So, Christian Peters,
you're in trouble when you take in the best quarterback from Livingstone.
He was serviceable for a CIAA schedule. He was very serviceable. So I give it a little something. And actually, he passed for more yards than the other 2 quarterbacks. Actually, the running back, Scotland, from Benedict, passed for more yards than 2 of Shaw's quarterbacks. That's how bad it was. Nonetheless, Christian Peters played a lot of the first half. And rightfully so. I know the coaches wanted to get him more in space. He's more of an athlete than he is just a quarterback, but they just didn't really get very far, and that's kind of hard against a front 4 that Benedict has. Silas Cruz was really the one that kind of put Shaw in position to score in the third quarter, but They decide to go for it on fourth down. Rightfully so. When you're down, 4 scores or so, you might as well, go for it. And they were not able to convert. So there are certainly questions there, but I mean, given the fact that Shaw is a team that always is wanting to contend for a championship, the way that they just came out so flat, it just drives a lot of questions as to where do they really go from here. It was just a bad showing on the part of Shaw.
And things don't get any easier for them as you got Union. And then you're going to play, I think, Bowie. They played, I think they have the year where they play the evil Axis powers of the North, an anti-Benedict schedule. So
that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, Shaw's got some real issues here. Without, if they can't get their offense in gear, it's going to be brutal. The Virginia Union has a very good defensive front, just like Benedict does. So that doesn't help. And so does Bowie. And Bowie's very revenge minded after what happened last year against Shaw. So this isn't going to be pretty for the plain old Bears in Raleigh at all. It's just not.
And I will say, I try not to get into any CIAA beef a lot, but I was kind of glad that Shaw got beat down like that. I still have nightmares about what they did to us in Mobile in that Pioneer Bowl. So
Yeah.
I was kind of glad to see them, get beat down a little bit.
Petty. You are over there in SWAC country over there, so that pettiness is rubbing off in a big way. Petty.
That's why they wanted us in their conference, because we got our own little level of pettiness at Ski.
Yeah. No, I get it. All right, I get it. But on the flip side, Virginia Union just decided to wake up and remember who they were and just absolutely unloaded on Morehouse in the fourth quarter. Because before that, it was a bit of a snooze fest. It's like, okay, all right. And then the fourth quarter came and they just absolutely just decked Morehouse. And I kind of feel bad for Morehouse here because I felt like, they were just kind of were put in a really bad spot overall in this matchup. So yeah.
When I first, looked at the game, of course, that at the beginning it looked like Jada Byers was just gonna oh my God, here they go. Then the game, Morehouse kind of settled in the game. That defense kind of settled in. That was one of my points about when I was, going around saying that I think Morehouse could probably get them. Is that Morehouse defensively that has not been their problem. Morehouse has been a stout
Right.
defensively. The only problem with Morehouse is their defense was normally playing so many snaps, prior to, because their offense was really stagnant. But if you go back and look, technically, Morehouse could really hold teams 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and the fourth quarter just, listen, just have it, just take the game. So I knew they had some pieces coming back. I know that Coach Wiltshire, he talked about some pieces that he was going to get. And I was really looking forward to the defense. And Morehouse still looked, they looked pretty good defensively. So I'm sure they'll go to work on their offense. Like, they had little spurts, but just couldn't put anything together. I mean, and not taking anything away from Virginia Union, because Virginia Union defense is legit. I don't want anybody to think that, like, their defense is legit. And they played really physical ball. I was almost a little shocked at how physical that they were. Like some of those licks, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
poor Morehouse, like, get up. But I think ultimately, Morehouse, they should be better than a 1-win, team that they were last season. But who knows? It just depends if they are able to get that offense going, get the right guy, running the offense or whatever. But good showing at first. It could be worse, but you're absolutely right. Virginia Union woke up and realized, like, hey, we're Virginia Union, and they definitely showed it.
Yeah, if you look at the third quarter, towards the end of the third quarter, entering into the fourth quarter, Morehouse had 3 straight drives of 3-and-outs. I mean, that defense got very, very little rest during that time, and that's when the VUU went on a barrage there. So they hung tough, but
Yeah.
man,
Now,
that's
Chris,
rough.
I want to bring this point up to you now. Now I have not done. That's part of my thing that I'm going to do today. Is I'm going to look at these games. So with this running clock, okay, on first
Yep.
downs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of coaches are starting to complain about you don't get that many possessions, per the half. And I looked at a few and I noticed that there are less possessions, even these teams that run a little bit up tempo, and I was looking at the amount of snaps. I was like, wait, it is making a difference. And I think for defenses, that's probably gonna be a plus. Depending on your ideology, your coach's
Sure.
philosophy about football. Like if it's defense, okay, cool. If my offense is stagnant, whatever, I don't have to worry about my defense playing 70, 80 snaps. So like, so I think that's gonna be interesting. I will go back and do some more digging into that for the games and see will these defenses be able to hold up. So you got a good defense that might bow well for you.
Yeah, I would say the other thing though is if it's a media game, if it's being broadcasted, there are just a lot of commercials, and it just felt like the games really didn't change pace wise, like watching the entire thing, because the media piece of it was just drug out. Every
Tell me
time you
about
had a kickoff or somebody scores, oh, we're going to media timeout. So I think that may have neutralized some of that impact of having the running clock and keeping the game moving and going. So
it. Tell me about it. That Red Tails Classic. I was so tired of seeing that red man walk out on the field. I was really sick and tired of seeing him walk out on that field.
Right.
I think sometimes it can be a momentum neutralizer too, in the flow of the game. That game, that Red Tail Classic, not to get into it, but it just had some moments that it's like, oh, now here's the break, So yeah.
Yeah. So there was a question about the MEAC and the MEAC poaching schools. And I want to take a brief moment to address that because, every time somebody brings this up, I point them back to this article I wrote about funding and the difference in funding. And we've kind of already touched about that earlier in this show with Mississippi Valley. But the problem with the MEAC poaching schools is, the entrance fee into Division I is huge now. It's like $1 million, and I think it goes up every year, piece by piece. So that's one, and number two is the fact that you're going to have to give something up probably. You're either going to have to start charging students more monies, and you can be capped on that by the state as to how much you can charge in athletic fees to students. And it's different when you've been winning, right? And then you go to Division I and you can't win. Like that's kind of deflating as a motivator to get people to come to your school. A lot of the HBCUs are smaller in enrollments too, so that also has an impact on trying to raise money in order to compete at the Division I level. There are just a number of different roadblocks there, is what I would say. Um, if you're looking at a school that can get there, they've got to have, in this day and age, you almost have to have things like graduate schools, and a lot of people, even if they're not on campus, enrolled in your school to get your numbers up, to try to pull in um, um, more dollars to compete at the Division I level. But like a Virginia State, their athletics budget was like $4 or $5 million or something like that. $1 million is what, 25% of the budget. I mean, that's huge. So I just don't think that this is like the MEAC trying to poach schools. It's not going to be easy. I think some schools are more likely to be dropping down, and they probably need to um, rather than move up. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah, well, of course, Chris, I'm all for the Tuskegee to D1 conversation. I'm not on board to the Tuskegee to the SWAC or the Tuskegee to the MEAC conversation, but I am for Tuskegee moving D1 for a couple of reasons. However, every school's problem is not every other school's problem. When I hear people talk about, because I know a few years back, people were saying, oh, Kentucky State should go to the MEAC. The same school that these people that I met, they were literally a few votes away from those people saying close the door and sending their students, dividing them up between the other Kentucky State institutions. Like, this was just a few years ago. They're trying to level it out now because they got the bailout, even though I don't like to call it a bailout because it's money that's actually owed to Kentucky State that they should be given. However, I don't think people spend enough time, and maybe they wouldn't understand the 990 forms, but I think people should really get in that dig into it before they get to talking about moving and going up, because a lot of our institutions are in peculiar situations. And even when you look at 990 forms, you got to have in context. Context matters, because a lot of our institutions, their budgets now are bloated because of the COVID, money that they receive. And now you see this sharp decline in their revenues, per year, because they're kind of like falling back into the normal place. So those schools that did a lot of spending and they do a lot of investing, to get returns on that money, you start to see them kind of like creep back into the same place that they were in, So I don't know, and then what's the difference? One of the things that concerns me about a lot of our institutions is that there are a lot of women's groups out there that are writing these open letters to our conferences. One in particular, there's one in California that did this study on the SIAC, I think in 2021. I mean, it really talked about how there is this, they really accuse the SIAC of manipulating, being Title IX compliant. And when I went through it, I'm like, okay, anybody's starting to address, these issues that they bring out. I mean, they bring some points out. So you start talking about moving up a level. You still got to get Title IX compliant. You're going to be under the radar. Like, we got to get our ducks in a row. And just because we win a football game, I know that it's all good and dandy. But I tell you what, you win a football game, go drop a donation to your university. Like, go send them $20. I mean, if you stream a game, that's money. Go send them $20. Let's be the best we can be where we are. Let's show support where we are. We don't have to go to FCS to show that level of support. Now, if we can, then do. But don't go to struggle. Like, let's plan. Back in high school, they had that. People don't plan to fail. They fail to plan. So you want to have the conversation, yes, but there's things that we can do right here where we are to make our institutions, a lot better. And it's just not win a football game over. Let's bring them. I know a lot of people are throwing Benedict name into send Benedict, but 3-4 years ago, nobody would have been saying Benedict to the MEAC. That wouldn't have been a part of the conversation. But let's get that footing good in D2. And then, let's have a conversation later on down the road.
Great points there, Kendrick, for sure. And I just want to bring something up. And Chris and I both know a lot about this. And this is a Winston-Salem State University jersey from our era of WSSU football. And you see that right there. It says MEAC. I will put it on. It's a little tight, but shout out to all of the true players. But Nah, man. I think great points that you made there, Kendrick, for sure. And Chris and I lived this cautionary tale in our time at WSSU. And I think it's a big reason why I have a view on the things that I do now. I think for me, I just, it seems so easy. Certain schools there are certain schools in Division II that have better fan bases, that have better history or whatever, but they're just not in a place financially to really make that move for Division I. And I always looked at the competitive balance of HBCUs, and I think it's easy to say, okay, yeah, we'll send everybody that's bigger up to Division I, and just kind of I've heard people throwing the CIAA should go pick up some schools that aren't even in the NCAA and add them while letting a Virginia State or Bowie State, to schools that have proven themselves to be legitimate D2 schools and really competitive D2 schools, at the D1 level. And I just think that everybody doesn't need to be Division I. I mean, it is what it is. I don't think that the CIAA. I think that the CIAA is great when you have a difference in the schools and we talk about the CIAA South a lot, Chris. One of the things that you look at, I think you and I have talked about this, is when you're looking at positioning yourself, and even if we're just keeping it on football, which is what everybody talks about and everybody thinks about, you look at it in North Carolina. I believe there are 28 Division I and Division II programs. Half of those are Division II programs, so 14 Division II programs. So you got your Power 5 programs. You got your G5 programs, your Charlottes who just made a program. You got your FCS, your A&T, your Central, your E-Lines, all of those. And then you get to Division II, and there's so many Division II options in a state that, there's only so much talent within the state. And, schools are forced budget-wise. It's more proactive to get guys in state. You look at Virginia State, and you look at Norfolk State. Now, those states don't have as many schools, period, overall. But the higher that you get up, the more there are. So I think in Virginia, there's maybe only 2 or 3 Division II programs. So if you think about all the kids in Virginia who aren't Division I players, I mean, they got in state, they got Virginia State, and they've got, I think, UVA Wise, right?
Emory and Henry as well, which is not far from Wise, is another Division II program.
Right. So just a handful of guys. I mean, but you look up at Bowie State, there's only, I think, 4 D2 programs up there. So, you look at those 2 schools, they've got a tremendous advantage in the CIAA. Just as far as, instead of getting a guy that might go to Winston or might go to Elizabeth City or might go to Elizabeth City State, they're kind of all concentrated in that area. And once you get up and they have to start competing at an FCS level with a Norfolk State for the same players, and they have to compete against, some of the other FCS schools, it kind of takes the air out of that a little bit as well. Plus, I think the competitive balance is important as well. So all of that to say, MEAC fans, I understand you want more schools. We get it. But I think at the end of the day, man, the CIAA, it's 120 plus 110-year league. They got to stay strong. They can't just have all private schools, and everybody can't just be in North Carolina. They come on. VUL, no disrespect. UDC, obviously they're a Division II school, so they're a little bit different, but they don't have football. I mean, you lose a Virginia State, and then you're supposed to replace it with UDC, who doesn't have football. I think people also mentioned Cheney, which I get for Lincoln, in state. But right now, if you know anything about their program, they don't have football anymore, and their basketball program is non-scholarship. So, they're not even giving scholarships. And CIAA is a basketball league, and that would definitely water it down. So, there's so much at stake, and I think people just kind of think, you can pick and plug schools in to make things work. But we've seen historically over the last 50 years, that doesn't always work. And example, just so remember the Rams.
We remember.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Chris, we'll talk about the Rams. I had a chance to see them against North Carolina Central. They did play in one of your dreaded D1, D2 matchups. 47-21 game, which actually is a closer game than they got last year. Not as close as the one 2 years ago. I sat on the sidelines, man. Or I stood on the sidelines, man. Covering the game, and I threw my hat down a couple times. I'm not even going to lie. Threw my hat down because not that I expected WSSU to win, but I felt like early on, and they had a new offensive coordinator. They had a freshman. They had a freshman quarterback, and I get it. They were kind of trying to sandbag it, but they're not going to run and gun over North Carolina Central in that first team defense. They're going to have to pass the ball a little bit. I think they did open it up, but only after they let them score 27 points in the second quarter. So I did see some things to like. I think the quarterback that they used, Lee, once they actually gave him a chance and they knew that it was somewhat of a passing game that was going to be out there, he made a couple plays out there, made some with his feet as well. I think he's got promise in the CIAA, and he was playing against the 2s and the 3s a lot in the second half. So probably more comparable to some of the players that they're going to see in the CIAA. So I think I did feel like there was a little bit of hope for the Rams. I've learned in the past about hoping for the Rams. I try to tell myself, but I think they showed some promise. They did actually get to Davius Richard a couple times. I've got photographic evidence to prove it. In the backfield when they were to kind of pin their ears back when they were up against the wall. So, and defense has never really been the problem in the Massey/late Boulware area. But what were your thoughts, Chris? As from your observations.
Yeah. Where do I even start here? Winston State, like their first 4 or 5 drives were like 3 and outs, right? I mean, it's the same thing that we talked about earlier with like a Morehouse. I mean, it was brutal in that regard. They did win the fourth quarter, though. That counts for something. They won 14-10. I mean, if you want to look at it on the bright side. But nonetheless, Winston was overmatched, and we knew that going into this game. So really, it's about the second half, because it's really a scrimmage at that point just to see what can they do. And so 21 points, if you think about it, 21 points is over the average of what they scored last year. That's a plus. They had 100-yard receiver in this game. That is a plus for a school that has a team that has struggled in the pass game in recent memory. You're not going to run against North Carolina Central. Like Winston just doesn't have that kind of talent to do that. But I just wanted them to show up, which is in the chat, and I totally agree. I think that I am a little hopeful on Winston to get over three wins. They got the schedule to do it, and I'm just glad that it wasn't like it wasn't last year when they got shut out. So to me, I think Winston State is in a much better position than they were last year, and I just think that North Carolina Central first half, we already knew what they're going to do. It's about the second half. This is your traditional FCS versus Division II. Nobody picked Winston to win, rightfully so, understood. But there's talent there. Dalen Lee throwing for almost 200 yards is pretty darn good. In his very first start as a true freshman. And they didn't really do a lot of, he was the only one that registered statistics as a quarterback. So they stuck with him in that regard. That's pretty darn good showing. Against a Division I FCS squad that is a conference champion and brought back a lot. So, that's all I can really say about Winston State. I thought that they did pretty good considering in the second half. If we're gonna talk about maybe some other things that have happened in the CIAA. We did talk a little bit about Livingstone and how they sort of laid an egg against Bluefield. And Bluefield scored uh, an incredible amount of points. And so did John C. Smith. And we haven't even talked about them yet, but they just ran all over West Virginia Wesleyan in a game that I thought would be closer than expected. Wesleyan was 1-10 last year, but they just, oh gosh, it was a barrage. It was brutal. So it's definitely shout out to Coach Flowers and company for what they did. 49 points. The defense only allowed 7. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So Bluefield and Josh C. Smith, they're definitely going to be tough outs this year, based on kind of what we've seen, at least in the first game.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Chris. We'll just any other thoughts? ECSU, what were your thoughts on those guys?
Elizabeth City came into this game. I thought that they, certainly, could they show improvement from what they had last year? They went up against Catawba, who also featured a first-year head coach in Tyler Haynes. ECSU struggled some throughout this game. They didn't pass for a lot of yards. I'm still not sold that Chase Williams is the quarterback of the future for them. But the coaching staff is trying to stick with him as long as they can. I thought the offensive line got a little better first came out. The running game showed some flashes throughout that time. The defense did the best they could, but it's hard to overcome 4 interceptions thrown by Chase Williams in that game. Nonetheless, he stuck. The Vikings stuck it out. They really stuck it out, and to still have a chance to win or at least tie the game towards the end was pretty remarkable, given how the SAC, the South Atlantic Conference teams, tend to kind of just leave us in the dust. I thought that it was a very I thought it was a good showing by Elizabeth City, and I think that just shows how the CIAA North is just going to be it's going to be a gauntlet when we get to divisional play. I also we've talked about a lot of CIAA teams. We didn't talk much about Lincoln, so just throw out there for Lincoln. So Lincoln lost to Clarion 30-20. But one name to look out for Lincoln was Malachi Langley, who also had over 100 yards receiving and 2 scores. Lincoln's got a pretty good wide receiver core to go along with Isaiah Freeman at quarterback, and Freeman not just led them in passing, but he also led them in rushing as well. So, kind of a big deal what they did, but they just fell into a hole too early against a less than stellar Clarion team. Nonetheless, this is another game where I would say progress is made here because of the simple fact that Lincoln did not get blown out. They did fight to the very end. They lost by 10, just like Elizabeth City lost by like 8. That's progress. That's a step up here. And I think we'll see, more of what they can do. Lincoln playing post, which is the lower end of the Northeast 10 conference, is certainly a winnable game for Lincoln. So we'll kind of see what kind of happens there. Going to be very, very challenging.
All right, and yeah, Chris, talk to me. We got some players of the week, man. Who would you give your player of the week to this week?
I would probably say Jacque Hart. I hope I'm saying that right, at Bluefield State, true freshman, who came out and threw 5 touchdowns against Livingstone in his first college start. I thought that was a pretty darn amazing story, for him to have done that when their starter was out I believe he's out because of his injury. So yeah, I would say that that's probably one of the big shiny stars. Also, Upton Bailey, as previously mentioned, he rushed for over 180 yards um, against Norfolk State. Pretty big outing as well. And I would probably also say somebody on the Virginia Union defensive line. I mean, whether it's Armani Burden or Isaac Anderson, I mean, the things that they did on defense, I mean, it was brutal to watch if you were a Morehouse fan.
Gotcha. Good stuff there, Chris. I appreciate you for holding it down. And Kendrick, we got a chance to opine about our alma mater a little bit earlier. So, you get to gloat. Hey, you actually got a win, hard fought win. Give us your thoughts on what happened in the Red Tails Classic last night as we finish up, and then we'll go in this thing and wind this thing up.
Great game, great atmosphere. I will say, just glad we finally got a win, finally got over the hump. Like it was 2 rough years, and we almost gave it away there at the end. I think it was good for Division II football to see that display on TV. More about the game. I've seen a lot of Fort Valley fans, hit this panic button. I don't know why. Clearly, they're not watching the other SIAC schools, because had they watched the other SIAC schools, they would not be in the panic button. Luckily for both schools, that game will not count as a conference game, because really, when I first saw it on the schedule, I was like, hey, you lose this game, you're down 2 games, but Tuskegee has 11 games on the schedule, and that one doesn't count. And then Fort Valley only has 1 out-of-conference game. That's the VUL game, so they already have 8 other conference games that would count towards the conference. So from the game, Tuskegee has big play capabilities. With Antonio Meeks out there, he gives us he just gives us an edge. There was a couple of receivers that I expected to see that I didn't see. I got to go and find out what was up with those guys. But quality tight end play. He had the O'Neal. So I was really pleased. I was pleased at Bryson. One of the things last year that people critiqued about him was that his throws came out kind of late. You see that really improved for him. I think he went 12 for 18, something like that. So overall, really good. We still have back end problems. Still got a little youth back there. Hopefully we get that gelled up, because last year got us into a lot of shootouts. I really don't want that for my heart this year, to get into shootouts, especially the way other teams are passing in the conference. For Fort Valley, defensive line, front 7, they're legit. Fort Valley is going to be a problem for everyone else. You go back and look at the stats, Fort Valley really beat us down. I think they had 400 plus yards of offense to without 200 something. They were really able to move the ball, but once again, it goes back to the inability of them to flip the field when they need it, to make us drive the length of the field. That was like one of their Achilles heels. Durham going down and coming out for a couple of series, I think really impacted them. A lot of people have made a few comments about him, but I meant to come in and play hurt and still drop that 76-yard pass that we gave up with 50-some seconds left in the game. I really thought it was over with for him. When he gave it up, I was like, wait a minute now. Here we go. So that just goes to show the heart of his character and how competitive he is. And I think Fort Valley will they'll be fine. If they can string it together and get the Benedict, which I think will be, Benedict and Miles will be their toughest test so far on that schedule. But if they're able to get past those two, I look for them in the championship game, and we might just get that rematch in the championship game, and we'll see what happens. But overall, better. I was surprisingly pleased at the advancement that our offensive line has made. Still have some problems, up front. Still, we were not able to run the ball. We have not been able to run the ball consistently for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and that's concerning. I think we got 69 yards, 68 yards so on the ground. Got some young running backs, but they showed flashes. But we're going to have to be able to run the ball better, and especially if we attempted to run 38 times. Like, I mean, we attempted to throw the ball 17 times and attempt to run 38. So clearly there's a mindset that we want to try to establish the run. But to do it ineffectively that way, that would probably come back and be, a big problem for us later on down the line when we get to those stronger defensive lines in the conference. But luckily, there's no Benedict on our schedule, so we won't face that defensive line. I think probably the stronger defensive line we'll face so far next will be Miles, and that's further down in the season.
Yeah, that's interesting that you guys ran the ball so much when you guys have a former quarterback as the coach. I often, I look at a lot of the teams in the HBCU landscape, and a lot of them are defensive guys. So when I get a little excited when I see an offensive guy leading, because I'm like, okay, maybe they might spice it up. But, like you said, sometimes that conservatism does leak in. I know for certain team in Winston-Salem that wears red. They're trying to turn North Carolina red. But no, I think a great game cap to the end of a great week. I have to ask both of you guys, if you were grading the conference, if you're grading your conference, what grade are you giving your conference and why for this week? And we'll start with Kendrick and then we'll get Chris.
I'm going to give the SIAC week 1 an 8, and I'm going to tell you why. Ooh. I was so pleased to see multiple quarterbacks throw for over 300 yards in the conference. You had David Wright at Allen throw for about 308. You had Polo for Lane to throw for like 371. Then you had multiple 200 plus. I meant Kelvin Durham. I think he put up 260, 270, something like that. The new quarterback at Miles put up 270, and Miles wasn't putting up 200 yards of offense on anybody last year, so I know they're excited about that. And even Bryson, I think he did 217. So we might get a over 2,000 yard passer in the conference. So I'm happy we did not take 2 L's to NAIA schools. Savannah State held on. They almost threw it away, but they held on. Edward Waters, we're gonna get him a pass. Had a rough week, whatever. I'm gonna excuse Edward Waters because I have a soft spot for him.
Come on now, man. They gotta bring the class grade down a little bit. Come on.
I'm just, they had a shooter, almost an active shooter into their campus. Hurricane, I'm just gonna give them a pass. I'm gonna
God bless them. God bless
Edward Waters. Edward Waters out of this. We split with the CIAA. We got a win over the SWAC. We got a win over the Conference Carolinas and Allen. Man, listen, I remember that normally this would be a 0-7 start for the conference. So I gotta give my guys an A. I gotta give my guys an A. I'm sorry.
Chris?
Maybe I'm just a little bit of a harder grader then. I give the CIAA a B here. I think there were some pretty good games that they won. I think there were some games that they left on the table. The ones that pulled the grade up are certainly the wins against the FCS. Those are really great showings. I also thought it's really important to win out of conference games in Division II, and I thought like John C. Smith doing that was a big deal. So those games, and then Virginia Union to sort of round that out. also helps. But I can't give them an A because of the fact that, you've got, some games that were left on the table. Primarily what happened with Fayetteville State is not good. And then I thought that things that also bring them up is the showings by what, was predicted to be the lower end of the conference with Lincoln, Elizabeth City, was good. I thought Bluefield did extremely well as well. So I thought it was a really good opening weekend. I'm really curious to see how it goes into week 2. But yeah, I thought that was good. It was a good opening weekend.
Yeah, too, Chris. We talked about. You said you gave Bluefield 5-5. I mean, obviously it's Livingstone, and they've been trying to figure out this HBCU football thing since 1892. So, but what do you still saying 5-5, or? I mean, they still that. And we didn't even get a chance. We didn't even get a chance to talk about my new hashtag that I'm going, which is disband the CIAA South. Disband the CIAA South. I'm sorry. CIAA South has got to go at football. Like,
I mean, St. Aug laid an egg too. We didn't even talk about that. It was bad.
I mean, CIAA South.
It was, yeah. I don't even have a response for that. I just don't.
Disband the CIAA South in football. Again, I mean, the Fayetteville State is the defending champion, but look, man, get your 4 rivals, and I don't know.
I just think the CIAA South is just at a competitive disadvantage now. I just do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there are way too many. I think there are way too many schools in North Carolina, and if folks can't get out and recruit outside the state, then it's. I mean, you're fishing at in a very shallow pool. But anyway,
well, Fayetteville State, to their defense, there's a running joke about Fayetteville State every year, offensive coordinator. So they have that issue again this time around. I thought they recruited reasonably well for their roster. I just think it's game 1. It's a rivalry game. It's a toss-up. It's on the road. Fine, I'll give you that. The rest of the conference, though, or the rest of the division, rather, Winston State, that's pass, and that's not being a homer or anything like that. But that's it. That you're going to get to a Division I conference champion. Once you get past that, Shaw, Lane, and Ned, that's not good. Livingstone, that's not good. John C. Smith, yes, check the box. And St. Aug, So, it's a problem. It's a real problem in the CIAA South now.
Yeah, which is so crazy because North Carolina actually ran the CIAA for so long. But I think, you had a couple of new programs come in the state. You got Charlotte, which, they're FBS now, but that comes in, that just kind of pulls the vacuum there, North Carolina, the North Carolina schools, they got to get out of the state and get some talent, or they're going to be where they've been. So anyway, yes, we're disbanding the CIAA South. That is the movement until we see otherwise. Disband the CIAA South. It should have been East-West. When Bluefield State came in, we had a chance to wash it all away and make it clean and start at East-West and just, I don't know, man. Maybe just the name just needs to go. I don't know. But anyway, I will pull Kendrick back in as we look at the SIAC schedule. We'll look ahead really quick. Kendrick, I'm going to go ahead and
the schedule for this week. What are your thoughts?
So this is our big SWAC week. I think we got 3 or 4 matchups with the SWAC. We have Lane with A&M, we have Miles and Bama State, and we have Savannah State and Bethune-Cookman. So those are all interesting matchups. there's not much. Well, you won't find film out there floating of the Miles and Lane game. Don't know whether that's by a little design or whatever. But it's not much out there. So you have to follow the stat line and see what kind of happened if you have any insights. Lane has showed the propensity to play SWAC teams close and even coming up with the win against Tennessee State. And they have had wins against Pine Bluff. You got Miles. Miles pretty much plays Lane close. You're talking about this Miles defense shut Bama State's offense down for 3 quarters. I know SWAC people probably chew me up for this, but I don't really know if there's much improvement for Bama State's offense. So, but I know there's much improvement for Miles's offense, and that defense is, it's still pretty stout for Miles. So we will see, So I have Miles winning that one by 3. That's actually the only one I really have the SIAC getting next week. We have Tuskegee going to Kentucky State. It's just one of those things we'll see. You also have Albany State versus Valdosta State. Oh my God, yeah, I'm that one. I'm torn. I'm torn because I know Albany wins that one. It's gonna get real hot on Coach Jackson down in Valdosta. But Albany State, they're growing. But I think what we saw in the end of the Wingate game when they brought in Knowles has a different control of the offense. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him, get to go against Valdosta. I think he gives them the better chance to go. But that's the first year staff. I think they probably learned a lot going against Wingate. Not really sure. I didn't watch much of Valdosta State, so I won't opine there. You got Fort Valley going to Clark, or Clark going to Fort Valley. No, Fort Valley going to Clark. To be honest with you, if that same Clark that shows up in Kentucky State, that's going to be a bloodbath. I think Fort Valley takes out their frustration on Clark. You got Benedict going down to Edward Waters. That was one I had circled, but after the FMU game, that might get ugly quick down, down there. Yeah, that I don't know. Prayers up for Edward Waters for that one. Let me see. I can't see that. I can't remember who Allen has. Allen has, do they have Shorter? Let me look for
Columbus State.
Okay, they have Columbus State, so we need that one. I think we should get that one. The other one I didn't talk about. I talked about Lane and Benedict. Yeah. So that's pretty much all of them. So we'll see. It's those are toss up. That Savannah State Bethune-Cookman, that's an unknown game to me. Savannah State came out against Southeastern strong, and then halftime adjustments, and then I looked back. I turned away from the game and looked back, and Southeastern had taken the lead. I said, "Wait, what? Wait, what happened down there?" But I don't know if they have what it takes to beat Bethune-Cookman. I'm just not. I'm not convinced. They can convince me this week, but if Bethune-Cookman takes them lightly, then it might be one of those ugly wins. But they might, sneak past them. But my one FCS knockoff, I'm riding with Miles to knock off Bama State. Finally.
So I guess I'll cover the CIAA real quick. Davenport is hosting Bowie State. That should be a very interesting one because Davenport is ranked in the top 25. They kind of let off the gas against Thomas More, new Division II program, last week. So should be a fun game to watch. If there's a get back for Bowie State, it's going to be taking down another GLIAC team this year, where they took a loss to Saginaw last year. John C. Smith hosts their first home game of the year against Walsh. from the GMAC. That's going to be a really interesting game. See if they can continue their offense the way that they did and play solid defense. Shaw hosts Virginia Union. Look out below. Lincoln goes to Post University in Connecticut. Should be a competitive game as well. Post hadn't really won many games against Division II teams, so that'll be really interesting. Embry and Henry, who took down Concord, who was a favorite for the Mountain East Conference Championship, took them down. They scored over 50 points in that game. They traveled to Bluefield State, so could be offensive fireworks there. Virginia State has a opportunity to take a big step in Division II play against Tusculum. That's a school that they have had some recent games against and some degree of success. The Down East Classic for Elizabeth City is this weekend against St. Aug. So looking for some positives there for ECSU. Can St. Aug show more life than they did against Lenoir-Rhyne? Winston-Salem State travels to Ohio Dominican in a non-conference matchup. Should be really interesting. ODU played really tough against Notre Dame College, another top Mountain East club. Lenoir-Rhyne gets another crack at the CIAA, traveling to Fayetteville State, and what should be a really, really challenging opportunity for Fayetteville in a bounce back game. And then finally, Catawba, who played Elizabeth City this week, plays host to crosstown rival Livingstone, and what likely is not going to be a very close game. So that covers the CIAA this week.
Good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Good work there, Chris and Kendrick, on this week's matchups. It's definitely a big task ahead of some of these schools. This is kind of the weekend, especially in the CIAA country, man. You're like, this is where you really show who's really a fan, because it's not a lot of sexy matchups. It's that grit Division II. Who's actually, who actually is going to be, who's actually a fan of the sport. Who has the biggest opportunity to get their face back, Chris? Would it be Shaw getting its face back against Virginia Union, or would it be Fayetteville State getting its face back against Lenoir-Rhyne?
If Virginia Union plays like they did in the first three quarters, then Shaw probably has a better opportunity. I just think that Lenoir-Rhyne may have a little too much for Fayetteville State to keep up. So I think it's probably going to be Shaw bouncing back to have a more respectable showing against the Panthers.
Way back when I was on a space and I predicted a all maroon CIAA championship, Union versus Shaw was my pick. Clearly that was before what happened last week. But I was trending towards the Bears train, but that
train's
we'll
been
see.
derailed,
And I must say this every time. I do hate maroon. First of all, I just do. I was consistent with it last week. I hate it, not just because WSSU was playing Central, but I hate maroon. And both those schools wear maroon. Jada Byers is a bad man. I would say, Kendrick, for you, who is Albany State? What chance are you giving them to get their face back against Valdosta State? As we know, the brother might be in trouble if he loses to another HBCU. But is that the biggest face get back this week?
Yeah, I'm not giving Albany State a chance in that game. I'm be honest. I'm just not. Not giving Albany State a chance in that.
They had to shift games last week, man. They were ready. Thursday night they were gonna be ready to play. They weren't ready for that North Carolina heat. That's what it was.
I think what we're seeing with Albany State is what happened to Savannah State last year, just trying to get acclimated to that style of offense. You're talking about like this is a historical precedent for Albany State, to try to go to that. I think Kentucky State is taking the transition a little bit better, but they also didn't have to play a wing it, like the first game, because that wing it defensive line, especially those ends, they were lethal. Okay, like
It's a little bit of difference between Wingate and Clark Atlanta. I
mean. So it's
that's like saying it's different living in Wingate versus living in Atlanta. That level of difference.
Definitely. I don't know. I think Get Back, because Edward Waters has the propensity to play differently at home, I think they can come out and maybe like go back, because I people had a lot of faith in them. I was one of the ones that had a lot of faith. They're getting the resources. They're in Florida. I was like, okay, this might be the year. They have quality coaches on that staff. I'm saying, okay, like it's a matter of time. Then to lose to FMU, I'm like, okay, well, whatever. Somebody said on Space last night, it's because FMU, like they're down in Miami, and those guys that we couldn't get, blah blah, whatever. I need Edward Waters to win that game. They didn't, so I think they have the better opportunity to get, because with the Shaw game, we it's like we don't know how good. It's like one of those things. Like it's still a lot of unknowns about those teams. So I think that trip to Jacksonville from Columbia, South Carolina, if anybody's gonna get a little get back, I think it's gonna be Edward Waters if they come out and play Benedict, a little bit more competitive. But I'm not holding my breath.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end it. Nobody hold their breath. But a great, exciting week of D2 football last year on the HBCUs. Make sure you guys follow these two guys on social media. Both of their handles here are also their handles on Twitter as well. Great follows all week long. We had Kendrick in there slinging, throwing bows with the guys from the SWAC, as he always does. And Chris, keeping it, Chris with the one-word recaps, so we'll see what happens in week 2, but always, I'm SJG, that's Chris and Kendrick. And remember, D2 HBCU football matters, and Norfolk State and Delaware State and Mississippi Valley State learned that personally this week.